I'll start this podcast off with a random thought of the day. I was sitting around praying today, talking to God or the higher being or whatever you want to call the entity that we all think is looking down upon us. And as I was praying, I asked for a sign. Just give me a sign, anything, man, just to show me, that you're there. I just want a sign of some sort. And then 10, 15 minutes later, out of the blue, a friend of mine sends me this quote, a spiritual quote. And this guy that, if you know him, his name's Marty, he's a childhood friend of mine. He don't really believe in the God that a lot of people believe in. So for him to send me something like this in itself was pretty astounding. But to send it 10 or 15 minutes later after I asked for a sign, a lot of people may say, well, it's just a coincidence, JPC. And it may have been, but to me, it felt awfully lot like a sign. And the spiritual quote went a little something like this. When you realize 2023 is a universal 7-year, which means everyone will go through a spiritual awakening. And the year will end with the date 12/31/23, 123, 123, which is the angel number 123, signifying to keep moving forward and good things are coming your way. I just thought that was great, man, that happened 10 or 15 minutes later after I asked for a sign. So you guys and gals tell me what you think about all that. Now, moving on to the sports topic of the day, we're going to talk about the Under Armour game where the two Crimson Nations showed out. Alabama and Oklahoma both looking really good. Alabama looks like they may be back to status quo. Oklahoma looks like, bigger picture, they may be on their way back up to the top. Let's talk about it. Well, how's it going out there today, everybody in sporting land? This is the OCF, that's the Outlaw of College Football, also known as JPC. That stands for Jesse Paul Clark on Facebook, spelled Jesse without the I. Also on Twitter at OCF Productions. Now, getting right to it. Seems like the Crimson Nations, I've been preaching that all year long. Man, what a scary alliance that would be if the two Crimson Nations were just to get together and decide to just take over. I know eventually they'll have to come to blows and they're gonna end up playing each other at some point with Oklahoma joining the SEC. And even down the road, maybe Oklahoma, if they're in the separate bracket from Alabama, they may end up playing in the playoffs or the SEC championship game. Because, we've seen it happen before with SEC teams. And the way these two are recruiting, you could see an emulation of what Alabama and Georgia have been doing for a number of years. It's just that Oklahoma would replace Georgia, which would not hurt my feelings in the least if they replaced those hedge pissers from Athens, Georgia. And with these recruiting classes that are coming in, that could very well happen. Albeit Georgia is recruiting at a higher rate as well. So I may be, teasing the Bulldogs just a little too much here. But at the Under Armour camp, numerous recruits showed out for Alabama and Oklahoma. So it was a Crimson Nation domination. Wide receiver Jalen Hall had 3 catches. I'll try to throw some graphs up here too. Jalen Hall had 3 catches for 15 yards. Defensive lineman Jordan Renaud led tacklers with 5 solo stops. Cornerback Desmond Ricks also had 4 tackles. So, University of Alabama had 3 prospects that done rather well, and looks like, things may be getting better, especially on the defensive side of the ball for Alabama. And the wide receiver as well would be a nice little addition because, we had some struggles at wide receiver this year. The wide receiver play wasn't up to par is like it normally is. And that probably hurt Bryce Young a little bit. So with the addition of Jalen Hall and these two defensive players coming in, maybe Alabama can address some areas that were lacking a little bit this year because the defense wasn't as great as it normally is. And we'll see what happens with Pete Golding in the offseason. My gut feeling is on the whole Pete Golding thing is he'll probably be here at least for another year, because there's rumor has it that they might be bringing back Jeremy Pruitt if they can get around the whole NCAA infraction thing that's been following them around like a dark cloud. Now, for the Oklahoma Sooners, Jackson Arnold dominated practice, it says, and was named captain. Had an average game, but threw a dart to Utah commit Mickey Matthews. Also ripped off multiple long runs via scramble and zone read. So he's a multi-versatile quarterback coming in. A lot of people don't realize that about Jackson Arnold, but this guy has some wheels on him. He can not only pass, but run as well. So seems so far that Jackson Arnold might be the real deal for Oklahoma. They may get him a great quarterback to complement some of the great defensive players that are coming in for Brent Venables. And if you can get the Oklahoma offense to continue to be great, or to be great, along with the defensive prowess of Brent Venables and the great defensive players that are coming in, Oklahoma could rise back to the top rather quickly. As evidenced by these defensive players at the Under Armour game, linebacker Lewis Carter, it says, got numerous quarterback pressures and tackles and was running sideline to sideline in this game. Meanwhile, Edge, now I'm probably going to butcher this name. I'm going to go ahead and let you know. Adepuju, I don't know, man. Adebore, whatever. Whatever his name is, however you pronounce it, had a great game. He says he had a sack and multiple pressures and tackles, and he too was seen running sideline to sideline. So both of these players, when you say running sideline to sideline, it tells me that they're not taking a play off and they're trying to be involved in the game. Even if they're not in on the tackle, they're contributing in some way. Now, what this tells me about both of these teams is that Alabama looks like they're going to continue status quo, and Oklahoma, all this ballyhoo about how great this class is, number 5 class in the nation, seems like it's on par to pan out to be that number 5 class in the nation. Looks like it's going to be a pretty good class coming in for Brent Venables, and that's what I've been trying to preach to a lot of people this whole season of his first year, especially with the turmoil he had coming in. I've preached upon that numerous times ad nauseum. But with this class coming in and the last class he had, things are going to start turning a little bit. And all those people out there and those naysayers that have been grilling on him because he went 6-7, like I said numerous times, Bob Stoops went 7-6, Nick Saban went 7-6 his first year. Lots of times good coaches start out with a subpar to barely average year, and it's only because they're weeding out the bad product. Whereas you have someone like, I don't know, let's get an example. Lincoln Riley. Lincoln Riley went 11-3, but it just didn't feel like 11-3, did it? And then on top of that, he comes in with all that publicity and all that tooting of the horn by all these ESPN talking heads and Colin Cowherd, and he follows up all this publicity, and great publicity, and the fact that he has the Los Angeles area now to recruit to, and has the 15th ranked class, which is a good class by some standards. But with the kind of money they're paying Lincoln, he should have been way up there. So it seems like, and I ain't trying to pat myself on the back and say I told you so, but it seems like by the way these recruiting rankings have panned out for Oklahoma, that eventually the worm's going to turn. And Oklahoma, I think, within 2 or 3 years, will be playing for a national championship. As well as Alabama, my team. Alabama will continue status quo up until probably Nick Saban retires. Then we'll probably slack off a little bit after that. All programs go through a transition period when you lose a legend. But with Alabama, if you look at your history books, people are always trying to say that Alabama's just Nick Saban, and that's a bunch of BS. Because if you look at your history books, what? Yeah, they had Bear Bryant too. Well, it was more than Bear Bryant too. In between that, you had Gene Stallings, who won a national championship in the 1990s and 1992. Bear Bryant, of course, just talked about him. He had 6 national championships. Before Bear Bryant, there was Frank Thomas, who won like 2 or 3 national championships, as well as Wallace Wade, who won Alabama's first 2 or 3 national championships. So Alabama is not just Nick Saban or Bear Bryant. Alabama has been doing this since 1925 as far as winning national championships under every imaginable format possible. We claim national championships that people try to say we don't deserve, but at the same time, their programs are doing the same thing. Y'all are claiming the same UPI coaches polls that used to have the national championship before the bowl game. Y'all claiming those, and AP titles, and Rose Bowl titles before the AP, because the Rose Bowl was considered the de facto national championship game before 1936. So, that's your little history lesson of the day. Alabama's going to continue to be Alabama, and Oklahoma's coming back. And that's all I got to say about that. There's a little heart down here. If you don't mind, hit that. Throw a few dollars in the coffers. Get me off the YouTube teat. And as always, KMCA to all the other teams. Class is now officially dismissed.